Hi, I'd like to continue the story of the mysterious murder of Maria Marten from the book of 1828. This is number 3, part 3. And this is where people start to know that Maria Marten has disappeared. Several months having elapsed since Maria Marten had left her home in an extraordinary and questionable manner, and no certain tidings having been heard of her, excepting those received at first from Corder, and those being extremely vague, unsatisfactory, and often almost improbable, it was natural that her father and his family should feel considerable excitement and alarm. This alarm was in all probability increased from the fact that Corder, having withdrawn himself from Polstead for several months, day after day and month after month rolled on without any intelligence being received, which was deemed the more extraordinary as she could write a good hand, and was known to have a great respect for her father, her little boy, and, indeed, her whole family. Towards Christmas, the Marten family became exceedingly alarmed in consequence of the absence of Corder, and their ascertaining that he had given them false representations respecting Maria. He always said, in answer to their inquiries, that she was well and happy, and on one occasion he said that Maria was living for a short time with Miss Rowland near Yarmouth, which, upon inquiry, turned out to be a most barefaced falsehood. The poor old afflicted father, half sceptical and half believing the statements so plausibly made, said, "Why does she not write to us?" Sometimes he deliberately replied that her right hand was lame, this is Corder, which rendered her incapable of doing so, and sometimes he made other excuses equally vague. It appears that Corder always had a subterfuge at hand whenever a close question was put to him, for, on his being asked the necessity of Maria's going to Yarmouth at all, immediately after he had left home on the 18th of May, he replied deliberately that it was his intention to have been married the next day, but he had discovered that the licence which he had provided was imperfect, and must therefore, of necessity, be sent to London to be signed, which expiry of this term, which would delay the nuptials for 3 weeks. At the expiration of this term, he had always held out to Martens that he had married her his daughter. The mysterious absence of Maria having continued for about 10 months, and Corder himself having also been absent for a greater part of time, she became the constant theme of conversations in the circle of her little family. The manner of her departure, and the Red Barn, and all the circumstances were reviewed, and the more they were considered, the more mysterious they appeared. At length, Mrs. Marten, the stepmother of Maria, said to her husband, "I think, were I in your place, I would go and examine the Red Barn." He inquired the reason why this suggestion was held out by her, to which she replied, "I have very frequently dreamed about Maria, and twice before Christmas I dreamt that Maria was murdered and buried in the Red Barn." "Why," said the husband, "did you not tell me this before?" Mrs. Marten replied that she did not like it because she thought he would consider her superstitious. After this disclosure, no steps were taken for a considerable time, as her husband did not appear to attach much importance to this disclosure she had made. But, having made it, she frequently importuned him, and at length he went with a person of the name of Botail, and a search was commenced. Having removed the litter from the floor of the lair, they thought that one part of the earth did not appear so solid as the rest, and upon examination they found that it was loose and capable of being removed with comparatively great ease. After removing the ground to the depth of about 1.5 feet, they discovered something like a human body wrapped in a sack, and a silk green handkerchief protruding through the sack, which the putridity of the corpse had completely rotted in that part. It would seem that the murderer had put his victim into the sack headfirst foremost, and in all probability it must have been done immediately after her death and while the body was yet flexible. The green silk handkerchief belonged to Corder and was that in which Maria left her father's house. This discovery having been made, Marten returned home without opening the grave any further, and the first inquiry was as to the kind of handkerchief Maria wore round her neck on the day she had left home. The reply was a green one. The poor old man then observed that, if that was the case, poor Maria was murdered, and the dream which his wife had related to him flashed across his mind in dread reality. As we shall see, as we have occasion to advert to the Red Barn and the grave of Maria, we shall at present make no further observations on the discovery of this atrocious and mysterious murder. But we cannot help exclaiming that the finger of God was here, and that a deed most foul, strange, and unnatural was brought to light by a plan to be devised only by his skill, which never fails. His skill being in italics, because it is God's skill. So they found the body in the Red Barn, and that's the picture of the Red Barn there. In consequence, a coroner's inquest on the body. In consequence of the body having been discovered under circumstances which left no room to doubt that a foul murder had been committed, information of the fact was immediately dispatched to John Wayman, Esquire, coroner for the Liberty. He immediately set off from his residence at Bury, that is Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk, and on his arrival at Polstead issued his precept, in consequence of which a jury was summoned on Sunday, who, having viewed the body as it lay in the barn and from its decomposed state, presented a most dreadful spectacle. The inquest then proceeded to the Cock public house, that's the house we featured in the earlier video, for the purpose of inquiring into the cause of her death. The first witness was called, Anne Marten. I am a sister to the deceased and know the body found to be hers, not only because she had a tooth missing, but by her hair. I know that the earring, comb, clothes, shoes, and leghorn hat to have been hers. I have not seen my sister since the 18th of last May, when William Corder came to our house to fetch her away. He went out at the front house and Maria at the back door between 12 and 1 in the morning. My sister was dressed in a man's coat, waistcoat, trousers and hat. Corder carried her clothes in a bag and said he was going to Ipswich to be married the next day, but he wished to keep it a secret from his friends. After they came out at separate doors, they joined. Corder came back on the Sunday following and said that they could not be married for 3 weeks, as a licence must be sent to London, but added that Maria was gone to Yarmouth to Miss Rowland's, the sister of a school fellow of his, and was very comfortable. Corder had a gun with him on the 18th of May and told me not to meddle with it, as it was loaded. He afterwards went away from Polstead every 3 or 4 weeks and said he was going to see Maria. And before he went the last time, he said he would now be married and that he was going to bring her to Colchester to see them. Her sister took 2 pairs of shoes with her, one from a Denmark satin and leather fronts, and I believe these produced produced to be the ones of those pairs of shoes. Next witness, Thomas Marten. Evidently labouring under great mental affliction. I am the father of the late Maria Marten, who has had 3 illegitimate children, the last of which by William Corder. I was not at home when she went away. I frequently saw Corder afterwards and inquired about my daughter, who he said was very well. I asked him why she did not write. He accounted for it by saying that she had a sore hand. Another time he said, "She is so busy when I am with her that she has no time to write." About a week before Corder last went away, he said the wedding clothes were brought and that he was going to be married and should be back in 3 weeks or a month. I received 3 letters from him afterwards, but not hearing anything from my daughter, I became very uneasy and at length determined to make a search. I did so and found the body about 18 inches under the ground in the bay of the Red Barn. About 6 weeks before the 18th of May, my daughter came home from Sudbury with a child, of which she said she had been delivered, and that Corder was the father. She was very weakly, and after some weeks it was brought to my wife in the night, and it died in her arms. My wife put it in a box, wrapped in a napkin, and after a few days, Corder said he would take it to Sudbury to be buried. He took it away in the night time. The next witness is Anne Marten, the stepmother of the deceased. After identifying the articles of apparel found on and near the deceased, deposed as follows. On the 18th of May, Corder came to me and said that Mr. Ballum, the constable, had told him that he had held a warrant to apprehend Maria for having had a bastard child, but to prevent this, he would take her to Ipswich and marry her the next morning. It was arranged that she should go out in his clothes, which he afterwards brought, and that she should exchange them for her own in the Red Barn. He said he would take her in a gig. He afterwards told me he had a good place for her at Miss Rowland's, and that she would want for nothing, as he had charged a £40 cheque for her. After this, I often saw him twice or thrice a day. He always said Maria was well and happy, but he could not marry her till next Michaelmas, in consequence of his brother John's death. My little boy told me that he saw Corder go from the barn with a pickaxe. I mentioned this to Corder, who denied that it was him, but said it was John Acres, who was working in the plantation near the Red Barn. He told me that Maria changed her clothes in the barn, but she had kept his coat over them till they got into the by-lane. I dreamed once before and once after Christmas that my daughter-in-law was murdered and buried at the Red Barn. Hearing no tidings of her, I became so uneasy that I entreated my husband, to make a search, and he did so. I'd like to end this video now. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and give a thumbs up, and I'll bring the next section in the next couple of days. Thank you for watching.